Roll up, roll up. Welcome to the first episode of the OC development journey, where you listen to me ramble about my OCs and their development over the many years I've been writing them. I'll be your host for the evening, and all you need to do is sit back and listen to me ramble. This episode is about the main character for my webcomic, Keys of Corruption. Everyone put their hands together for Rose Kingsley! Woo, yeah! Can you tell I'm excited to film this video? Keys of Corruption is about a world where only 1% of the population is born with special powers called keys. Distressing things start to happen to Rose when her mentor dies. This sets into motion a dangerous chain of events which will change her life forever. At the time of the release of this video, it should be out now! Follow me on my socials if you want to see more. So, for this video, I'm planning to redraw Rose in 3 of her many different eras. Rose Kingsley, the Eras Tour. So let me introduce you to her first era, Rose Kingsley and the fairy tale fanfiction era. Yeah, she's got deep lore. So, I've had Rose for about 6 or 7 years, and she was the 3rd ever OC that I created. OCs 2 and 4 have also stood the test of time, but they'll get their own OCDJ videos. But on to Rose. Rose was actually a side character in a larger fanfiction centered around the anime fairy tale. She was a nature dragon slayer, but for some reason, I made her element eat ether nano instead of leaves or anything remotely similar to actual nature. I still kind of vibe with this. I think it's a very unique take on how dragon slayers actually work. My only problem is, for like half the story, she doesn't know what element she's supposed to be eating. So like her magic's kind of just like sucking life out of her, which is cool. But she finds out halfway through the story in like a cutscene. So, not really executed brilliantly. So she had the Dragon Slayer powers, but she also had another section of her powers because she was the daughter of Zareth. Now don't lose me. This execution was fucking fire. She was the daughter of the literal personification of Mother Nature, as well as the Black Wizard Zareth. She's an icon. She had this dual dragon mode with black magic that kind of turned her emo. Like, she had black hair, black eyes, looked cool as hell. The scales under her eyes were black. Like, oh, she was so cool. The reason why it was important that Zareth was her dad was because I was like, well, her magic's killing her. So what if her magic's killing her because she loves nature too much? And then I was like, oh, the curse of contradictions exist, and that's how that happened. It was awesome. Like, my brain, enormous. Rose's character, however, was a little bit of a mess. Well, more of a mess than whatever the hell I was doing with her Dragon Slayer powers. In the beginning, Rose was very boisterous, very loud, and a little bit argumentative. She was supposed to be along the same lines as Natsu, but a little bit younger. I think it was around the Daedalus arc that I figured out that Rose might have been the type of person to get overwhelmed and lash out at people. Considering that she had no magic and was essentially helpless, Daedalus was a good arc to explore this. My only problem was that I had this thought once and went, oh yeah, let's do this. And she started butting heads with another character, the main character of the fanfic. And because she was a side character, I never really thought about exploring her feelings in the fic, so it made the readers actually hate her, because this little overwhelmed to lash out thing was never introduced beforehand. I just threw it in there for a laugh. I remember a comment so clearly being like, you know, I always found her annoying, but now I just fucking hate her. And I was like, oh, I've messed up here. And as much as I was deeply offended and probably deleted the comment, it was a bit of a lesson in writing. It was the first time that I had really thought about how my characters were being perceived by other people. It's very much along the lines of how someone can interpret your actions completely differently to how you actually want them to be. This comment kind of highlighted that for me. I reeled her back in and I made her apologize, and she kept apologizing for like 30 chapters because it was stuck in my head. But yeah, she kind of made up for that. I ended up having to stop writing for a bit because I was going through my GCSE exams, and then I went back to writing right afterwards. And I had to read some of it back just to figure out where I was going and what arc I was in. But when I was reading, I noticed that Rose was written to be, well, autistic. It wasn't intentional, so I was like, oh nice, I'm being inclusive without meaning to. Big mistake. Turns out, because it was unintentional, and I just wanted a Rose to be a little bit quirky, she was very stereotypically autistic. So, I went back and changed that, like any sound-minded person would do. I went back and tried to edit around some of the things that will make her less stereotype. It mostly got retconned moving forward in the fic. To this day, I still write her with autism, and I've definitely gotten a better grasp on it since interacting with more autistic people. I understand her better now, and I think that shows a lot more in her later editions. Maybe I should mention her design now. Honestly, can't remember why she has red hair and green eyes, but I feel like it's because I wanted her to be a bit fiery while also having her eyes to reflect the nature thing. But I feel like that's giving 14-year-old me a little bit too much credit. I was also at a stage, considering I'd only really been watching Fairy Tail, where I thought wearing bras was raunchy and cool. So pretty much all of my OCs at some point had that going on. Rose was a very much unfortunate victim to it. It happened for a while. I actually feel really nostalgic coming back to her character designs and stuff, because I was just making so many designs and it was fun. Some of them were so bad, but you can tell I was having fun. I should say, I never finished this fic. Rip to those readers. But while I was having a debate on whether to end it or not, I ended up making a lot of AUs containing the trio of my fairy tale characters in other animes. And one of these was Attack on Titan. There was genuine thought out lore to why the trio got stuck in each AU, and this was actually one of my favorite AUs because they had no magic, like at all. Like one of them had colorful hair, it instantly got changed to black because there's no magic. So because they had no magic, I really had to get down to the nitty gritty of how they held themselves, how they fought, and how they presented themselves when class and war are brought into the picture. Rose was actually one of the ones that developed the most, and I gotta say, I love this version of her. Because of timeline reasons, and when Attack on Titan starts at season 1, Rose ends up being about 20 to 24 years old. So she's a lot older than anything I've ever written her at. Because of this, Rose became a lot more put together and more of a cohesive character than anything she would usually be. And this was the AU that made me realize that Rose would make a really good main character for a story. So let's actually talk about her little mini plot. When thrown into this world, Rose is one of the first characters to quote-unquote adjust. Or at least, it seems like it. Saving people and giving people hope is what Rose wants to do while she was part of Fairy Tail, and those morals carry over, meaning she's first in line to join the Scouts. But after the first mission, it becomes very obvious to the audience that she hasn't adjusted well. She's overwhelmed, and then she lashes out. It's Levi that actually ends up helping her. He sets up a routine for her that falls in line with his own, so they don't actually have to talk. They can just silently work across from each other. Rose's first prototype really didn't have any older friends, but I think her having these and them being a lot wiser really helped her mature in a way I never think she would have in Fairy Tail. She ended up becoming this bantery kind of character who would only argue back when she knew a decision she was making was morally right, even if it had unknown consequences. She was the kind of character who would notice you weren't alright, but would confront you when you were alone and listen while you voiced problems. She wouldn't try and fix them, she'd just listen and comfort. Rose became a cheery character, very much a light in the shadows, but she still had the ability to get down and dirty when she needed to as a way of survival. It was these things that made me realize that Rose would be a great main character, being empathetic but not a pushover, morally sound and being able to stand on her own 2 feet while also knowing she can rely on others. Her mentality of looking out for the little guy was common in a lot of Sunshine main characters, but it's the level at which she matures into is something that I actually love. It's no wonder I made her the scout leader after Hanji, and I enjoyed that idea. There was some romance involved with Rose in this fic, specifically with Colt Grice, because I got attached to him before season 4 part 2 came out, so consider his entire death retconned in this. But the romance starts when Yelena gets to the island and Rose finds a letter in the boat. I just realized a piece of information that's actually needed. Rose can't read or write, and that follows through in any iteration of her. She can't read or write. So she ends up taking it to Levi, who reads that it's from Colt, and he wants to know what happened to his uncle, throwing in a few devils in there. Rose wants to help the dude, and finds out what happens to his uncle, and then forces Levi to help her write back. From there, they start writing back and forth, and it's super sweet, because Rose is actually learning to read and write just so she can talk to him better. And it takes about 4 years until Rose is like, dude, we're on separate sides, we can't be doing this, and cuts communication. And that works for a little bit, until Rose saves his life on Paradis, and they meet in flesh for the first time. Does this count as a meet cute, actually? Anyway, that's really all I had for this section, but it was such an important era for Rose because that's when I had that mentality shift. So, now we'll be moving on to our third and final one, the Rose family that currently exists in a webcomic. So Rose is 18 when the story of Piece of Corruption starts, so in the middle of both Prototype 1 and 2. You know, I don't know if I mentioned this, but Rose in the fairy tale fanfiction, she's 16. Back to Rose Kingley of Keys of Corruption, because that's not confusing at all. She's very much in the archetype of sunshine main character, but she has a lot of naivety about the world around her. I should probably describe this world a little bit. Essentially, in this fantasy world, only 1% of the population are born with special powers called keys. However, they are hunted down, discriminated against, tortured, and publicly executed. So they're not really doing well. Rose just wants to figure out who she is and where she fits into the world. But as she starts to learn more about that world, she gets less and less naive, and her attitude very much becomes more about the looking out for the little guy. This comes pretty suddenly and heavy to her when she literally experiences a public execution of a key wielder. She then understands the weight of what it means when she meets the family of the dead key wielders. The development of the comic story comes from Rose's morals evolving and then becoming more solid over time. In my head, Keys of Corruption is kind of split into two parts. Part 1 gives fairy tale mixed with a bit of Bungo Stray Dogs, and part 2 is very Attack on Titan season 3 and 4. Not because of the earlier fanfiction, but because of the vibes and the topics that I'm presenting. I really don't want to spoil anything about this comic and where it goes, so you're gonna just have to read the chapters when they come out. However, I will say Rose very much becomes a driving force for change because of how far she'll go to look out for the little guy, which essentially kickstarts an entire revolution. She seeks out people to help and actively gives them safer environment just because her caring nature has helped foster good people around her. Rose also feels like she's in a position of privilege where she can publicly take the risk of helping the little guys, so she takes that responsibility in stride. Similarly to the Attack on Titan AU, Rose is kind and would notice problems and confront in private, only offering assistance if asked. She's very much that embodiment of light in a dark area, and people try and follow that light wherever that guides. She's a character that suffers a lot, and when she suffers, she feels that, and she feels it very deeply. But when she's done, she moves on. Of course, you can't forget, and she doesn't forget, but she learns and continues forward. Rose is the kind of character that I can look at and be like, I think everything's going to be okay. Rose's design is very much a reflection of her sunshine personality. Big smile, positive body language. I love her little space buns, I think they're so cute. I also like that she has the daisy motif going on with her accessories, considering that daisies are weeds. I am genuinely so excited to share Rose's story and development in Keys of Corruption. It feels like I've spent the better part of 7 years slowly working towards this moment that has crescendoed into this idea. I've spent so long condensing what I've learned and fleshing it out into a singular character arc, and I think that this might be coming out at a time where it's important to hear stories like Rose as well. And I didn't plan that, but it works. So if you want to see more of Rose, please consider following me on my socials. All my links will be in the description, including links to chapter 1 of Keys of Corruption. If you're interested in hearing more of my rambles about my OCs, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an upload.